Project cars. Should you buy one or should you not? That's the question I wanted to pose to you all, and I'll give you my opinion. This is Dave from the Mopar Garage, and this is my 1975 Fury Sport project car. I've had this for a number of years, and actually it's almost completed. All that's left is the interior, and I'm not too far from getting that done. But the question is, should you buy a car that's in a disassembled state like this? If you've been on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, you've probably seen a lot of listings for project cars. And these can be, the prices can vary widely, and the condition and state of repair can also vary widely. So sometimes you can get a good deal, maybe not. My opinion is, I don't touch these things. And there's a couple reasons why that I don't think you should get a project car. The first reason is fairly obvious, is that you just really don't know what you're getting into. You can look through it as much as you want to. A lot of times, a lot of sellers, may not be very patient, or may not want to spend the hours it may take for you to go through the vehicle at length and go through the boxes of parts they probably have to go with it to figure out exactly what you've got and what you're paying for. And sometimes it's hard to figure out, what the real reason is as to why they stopped working on it. Now, people, life happens, and a lot of times you'll hear the same excuses or the same reasons, hey, somebody got sick, or I lost interest in the car. But oftentimes you'll also hear someone say, well, it ran when it parked. Yeah, okay, well, it doesn't run now. So, so that changes things, right? You just don't, and oftentimes these cars are seriously disassembled. I mean, the engines are taken out, transmission's taken out, maybe the body's been taken apart, primed and partially fixed, and in some cases painted, in some cases not. You never know how many parts it could be missing, unless you're an expert on the vehicle. And so, it's you're essentially taking on somebody else's problem. And unless you can get a good deal on it, I just wouldn't do it. I would rather, get a vehicle that hasn't been touched or modified, even if it's, not in the best shape. Unless it's like a super rare vehicle of some kind. But even then, you've got to be very careful about checking the VIN numbers and the numbers on the block and on the fender tags and stuff to make sure you're really getting what they tell you that you're getting. So, that's the first reason. The second reason is price. It's very hard to put a price on something like that. And a lot of times it's very hard to come to an agreement on a fair price, because the owner is going to see things very different from you. Oftentimes, unfortunately, I find that a lot of owners expect the buyer to shoulder an unrealistic level of risk. Hey, the car ran when it was parked 10 years ago. Okay, well, it ran when it was parked 10 years ago, but it's not running now. So I have to, I'm looking at it as a non-running car. In the seller's mind, they're going to think, well, it's a running car. Well, it was 10 years ago, but not now. And a lot of times the seller's going to have that perspective of all the hours they put into the car, the project, if they did, and all the money they put into it. And so they've got that number in their head, right? But that's not necessarily what the project is worth, and so sometimes it's just very difficult to come to a realistic number with a seller on something like that. As a buyer, you're going to want to offer a very low price, because as a project, something that's disassembled, you've probably got to haul it away, you got to haul the parts away, you've got to find a place to put it, and it's a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous amount of responsibility, a huge risk you're taking on. You're basically solving this person's problem. They're going to have to come off that price, and sometimes they're just not going to want to. and you have to walk away. And also, you know, if you're going to want to come to a fair price, you're going to have to spend some time. You know, it's not just like a regular car. You got to spend some time going through that vehicle inside and out, trying to figure out what's been done to it, what hasn't been done to it, and if that work that has been done well with decent quality, what parts are missing. Sometimes you may not be aware that there could be a ton of missing parts unless you're an expert on that particular vehicle. And you don't want to be caught in that situation. So that's going to take some time. A lot of times, a lot of sellers, you know, they're not willing to spend that much time, or they'll accuse you of being a tire kicker. But hey, you know, I'm serious. If I'm wasting my time to come out there, I'm serious. It's just that I'm going to pay for what I believe it's worth, and I have to do an assessment, and that does take some time to figure out how much risk I could take on and whether this is something I can do, and that's going to impact my pricing. But I haven't bought anything like that in a long time, and I typically wouldn't, unless it's a vehicle that hasn't been touched, and preferably if it's running. But I honestly would not consider buying a project car in the traditional sense, something that's been partially disassembled or totally disassembled, partially restored. You know, unless you have your own shop and you're a professional and you get it at a very good price. And that's pretty difficult to do, I think. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. Tell me what you think. Tell me about your project car experiences, you know, good and bad, and tell me what you think the pros and cons are. I've got a story I'm going to be posting probably in a couple weeks with my 1967 Dodge Coronet I had a number of years ago. That was a big project that I ended up kind of having to get rid of. But I did a few things to make it sellable, and I'll talk about that too. Because, you know, I think that the worst thing anyone can do is, if someone says, well, the car ran when it parked and oh, it just needs maybe a battery and points or something. Well, okay. Well, why don't you get the battery and points and get it running? You'll get a much higher price for it. You know, if it's a non-running car, you're going to get a much lower price. But, you know, sometimes it's hard for sellers to understand that. You know, they see it through their lens. Hey, I remember when this car was running 10 years ago. So that can be difficult. Anyway, again, check me next time. I'll be posting that video in a couple weeks. In the meantime, tell me what you think. I really would like to hear about your project car experience. Have a good one.